Once in a grand kingdom known for its opulence and splendor, the king decided to hold a magnificent ball to celebrate the 100th anniversary of his reign. The palace was adorned with golden decorations, shimmering chandeliers, and exquisite tapestries that told the stories of the kingdom's glorious past. The event was the talk of the entire realm, with nobles and dignitaries traveling from far and wide to partake in the festivities. As the sun set, casting a golden hue over the palace gardens, guests began to arrive, each more elegantly dressed than the last. The grand ballroom was soon filled with the sound of laughter, chatter, and the clinking of crystal glasses as people toasted to the king's health and prosperity. The highlight of the evening was the performance by the palace orchestra, which would play Symphony No. 12-3, Menuetto by Mozart, a piece that held special significance in the kingdom. As the orchestra began to play, a hush fell over the crowd. The music signaled the time for everyone to rise from their seats and join in a dance that symbolized unity and joy. The guests, with smiles on their faces, took to the floor, each finding their partner and moving gracefully to the rhythm of the music. The ballroom floor became a sea of swirling colors and elegant movements. However, amidst this sea of joy and movement, one corner of the room remained untouched by the festivities. A single table, draped in fine linens and decorated with a small bouquet of roses, was occupied by a lone figure. She was a girl with straight golden blonde hair that cascaded down her back, and she wore a sea blue gown that shimmered like the ocean under the moonlight. Her presence was striking, yet she sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the dancers with an expression that seemed to transcend the merriment around her. Who was this girl, and why was she here at the party, alone and seemingly detached from the revelry? Her face was a mask of serenity, but her eyes held a depth of emotion that hinted at a story untold. She did not smile, and her blue eyes appeared distant, as if her thoughts were far away from the grand ballroom. Despite her solitude, she exuded an air of elegance and beauty that did not go unnoticed. Among those who noticed her was the kingdom's young prince. He was a handsome and noble figure, known for his grace on the dance floor and his kind heart. As he danced with his sister, his eyes were drawn to the girl sitting alone. Intrigued by her presence and the mystery that surrounded her, he decided to approach her. He excused himself from his sister and made his way through the throng of dancers toward the solitary table in the corner. When the prince reached her, he greeted her with a warm smile and a polite bow. "Good evening," he said, his voice gentle and welcoming. "May I ask why a lady as beautiful as yourself is sitting here alone and not joining in the dance?" The girl looked up at him, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. She gave a small, almost imperceptible smile and replied, "I simply do not feel like dancing tonight. I prefer to sit and watch." The prince, intrigued by her response, offered to keep her company. "If you do not wish to dance, may I sit with you and enjoy your company?" he asked. The girl hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "If you wish," she said softly. "I would not want to keep you from the festivities, though." The prince took a seat beside her, grateful for the opportunity to learn more about this enigmatic guest. As they sat together, the conversation started awkwardly, but soon began to flow more naturally. The prince learned that the girl's name was Elena, and she was a guest of one of the visiting noble families. She spoke with a quiet grace and intelligence that captivated the prince, and he found himself wanting to know more about her. As the night went on, they talked about many things: the beauty of the kingdom, the history of the royal family, and their own personal dreams and aspirations. The prince found himself drawn to Elena's thoughtful perspective and her serene demeanor. She seemed to see the world in a way that was both profound and refreshing. Meanwhile, the orchestra continued to play, and the guests continued to dance, oblivious to the connection forming at the table in the corner. The second song had already begun, and still the prince remained by Elena's side, enjoying their conversation more than he ever enjoyed a dance. Eventually, the ball began to wind down, and the prince knew he had to return to his duties. He asked Elena for permission to leave, and she graciously granted it, thanking him for his company. As he stood to go, he glanced back at her, and she gave him a smile that warmed his heart. When the prince returned to his seat near the king, he couldn't help but steal another glance at Elena. To his surprise, she was no longer there. The table in the corner was empty, and it was as if she had vanished into thin air. Confused, he looked around the ballroom, searching for any sign of her, but she was nowhere to be seen. The king noticed his son's distraction and asked, "Why did you not join the dance, my son? And who was that you were sitting with?" The prince, still puzzled, replied, "I was keeping company with a girl who did not wish to dance, but now she is gone and I cannot find her." The king raised an eyebrow, looking towards the empty table. "I saw you sitting there alone," he said. "There was no girl." The prince's sister, who had been listening, added, "I only saw you sitting by yourself as well. Are you sure there was someone there?" The prince felt a chill run down his spine. He had been so certain that Elena was real, that he had spoken with her and shared a connection. But now, with both his father and sister insisting he had been alone, doubt began to creep in. Determined to find answers, he stood up and began searching the ballroom for any sign of Elena. He approached the guards at the entrance and asked if they had seen a girl leave, but they shook their heads. "No one has left since the party began," one of them said. "Everyone is still inside." The prince, feeling a growing sense of unease, returned to the ballroom and scanned the crowd once more. He asked the guests if they had seen Elena, describing her appearance and dress, but no one had any recollection of her. It was as if she had never been there. As the night came to a close, the prince was left with more questions than answers. Who was Elena, and why had she appeared to him only to vanish without a trace? Was she a figment of his imagination, a ghost, or something else entirely? He could not shake the feeling that there was something more to her story, something he needed to uncover. In the days that followed, the prince could not stop thinking about Elena. He searched the palace records for any mention of her name or her family's visit, but found nothing. He spoke to the noble family she had claimed to be a guest of, but they had no knowledge of anyone by that name. It was as if she had been a dream, a fleeting shadow that left no mark behind. Determined to find answers, the prince sought the counsel of the kingdom's wisest advisors and scholars. He visited the royal library, poring over ancient texts and legends in search of any clue that might explain Elena's mysterious appearance. It was there, in the dusty pages of an old book, that he found a story that sent a shiver down his spine. The book told of a girl named Elena, who had lived in the kingdom many years ago. She was known for her beauty and grace, but also for her tragic fate. According to the legend, Elena had been a beloved daughter of a noble family, but her life had been cut short by a terrible illness. On the night of her death, a grand ball had been held in the palace, and it was said that her spirit had attended the ball, watching the dancers with sorrowful eyes. The prince could hardly believe what he was reading. Could it be that the Elena he had met was the same Elena from the legend? Had her spirit somehow returned to the palace on the night of the ball? The thought both fascinated and terrified him. Determined to find out the truth, the prince decided to visit the graveyard where Elena was said to be buried. He made the journey in secret, not wanting to alarm his family or the court. When he arrived at the graveyard, he searched for her tombstone among the many ancient markers. At last he found it, a weathered stone bearing her name and the dates of her birth and death. As he stood before the grave, he felt a sense of connection, as if he could feel her presence. He knelt and placed a hand on the cold stone, silently asking for answers. In that moment, a soft breeze stirred and he heard a whisper in the wind. It was a voice, faint and ethereal, that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Thank you," it said, "for remembering me." The prince's heart ached with both sorrow and a strange sense of peace. He knew then that Elena's spirit had indeed been at the ball, and that she had found solace in their brief connection. Though she was gone, her memory lived on, and he vowed to honor her by sharing her story with others. When he returned to the palace, the prince told his family and the court about Elena and the legend he had discovered. He spoke of the importance of remembering those who had passed and honoring their memory. The king, moved by his son's words, decreed that a memorial ball would be held each year in Elena's honor, a night when the kingdom would remember not only its history, but also the spirits of those who had once been part of it. From that day forward, the annual memorial ball became a cherished tradition in the kingdom. The story of Elena, the girl who did not want to dance, was passed down through generations, a tale of love, loss, and the enduring power of memory. And each year, as the music played and the guests danced, the prince would take a moment to look towards the corner of the ballroom, where a single table would be set in honor of Elena, the girl who watched over them all.